What we're exploring today isn't just a topic, it's a quiet truth. Your ex is still watching you, not because they've stopped caring, but because silence is easier than facing what they lost. It's strange, isn't it? How someone can go silent, act unbothered, and yet their presence lingers. The absence isn't empty, it's loaded, and deep down, you sense it. This video isn't about blame, it's about clarity, about understanding what truly holds love together and what causes it to quietly unravel. You'll see why they pulled away and why their silence may not mean indifference. So, if you're still seeking peace in the middle of their silence, stay with me. Like the video if it speaks to you, and subscribe to Stoic Station for content that brings strength where noise used to live. Let's begin. 1. 2 core elements that form and sustain love. There are moments in life that defy explanation, when you meet someone and something in you shifts. You can't name it. You can't reason through it. You just feel it. That's where love begins. Not in logic, not in a checklist of compatibility, but in something far less predictable and far more powerful: attraction. Attraction is that split-second charge when she walks into the room and without a single word commands your attention. It's not what she says, it's the energy around her, the way her presence changes the atmosphere, the shape of her smile, the ease in her movement. It doesn't make sense, and yet it makes everything else fade into the background. That's the pull, that's the spark, and it's undeniable. But the very thing that pulls you in is also what blinds you. Attraction makes you overlook red flags, not because they're invisible, but because you choose not to see them. Your heart wants the story to work so badly that you silence your intuition. You convince yourself the small hurts are misunderstandings. The inconsistencies are just part of getting to know someone. You start telling yourself, she'll change. It's just a phase. I can help her love me better. And that's how it begins. Not with betrayal, but with you betraying your own boundaries in the name of connection. That's the power of attraction. It doesn't just excite you, it distorts you. And in that distortion, you allow behaviors that, deep down, you know you shouldn't. But attraction alone never builds anything lasting. That's where attachment comes in, the second element that holds relationships together long after the initial fire fades. Attachment is rooted deeper. It forms through safety, consistency, and emotional openness. It's built not when everything's easy, but when things get hard and the bond doesn't break. It's staying when it's not fun. It's leaning in instead of checking out. But not all attachment is healthy. Some of us grew up in homes where love had to be earned, where being seen meant being useful, where being loved meant being perfect. And so we carry that wiring into our adult relationships. We attach not from peace, but from fear. We chase not out of clarity, but out of a desperate need to be enough. That's why so many people stay when the attraction fades, because the chemistry is gone, but the attachment remains. You're not in love anymore, you're in limbo. You're holding on, not because it's working, but because you're afraid of what it means to let go. And that's the cruel irony. The deeper your attachment, the more pain you're willing to endure. Not because you're weak, but because you've convinced yourself that if you just love harder, they'll finally see your worth. But the truth is, love should never cost you your peace. It should never require you to abandon your self-respect. When attraction deceives and attachment entraps, you end up staying in places where you're no longer loved the way you deserve. And that's where the pain truly begins. Not when they leave, but when you stay, and slowly forget who you were before you met them. 2. The real reason people leave relationships. Breakups are rarely as simple as the love is gone. That's what most people assume, that the feelings just vanished overnight, that something inside them turned off, and that's why they walked away. But the truth is more complicated and far more painful. In most cases, the love is still there. It's just buried under the weight of unmet expectations, emotional fatigue, and a slow-burning loss of connection. What really fades first isn't love, it's attraction. And when that goes, something subtle but significant shifts. Once the attraction is gone, the relationship starts to feel like all work and no reward. Every conversation feels heavier. Every disagreement feels repetitive. You show up, you try, you give, again and again. But to them, it all blends into monotony. They stop feeling the emotional return on investment. What once felt exciting and alive now feels like a job they didn't apply for, one they no longer enjoy, and one they're quietly preparing to quit. But you were still loving them when they stopped loving you back. You stayed present even when they checked out. You forgave when they withdrew. You held the weight of the relationship on your own shoulders, hoping they would come back to help carry it. And that kind of love, that kind of loyalty, isn't weakness. It's strength. But strength, when unmatched, becomes invisible. You gave more than they could recognize, and you held on longer than they understood. And that hurts. They didn't leave because you weren't enough. They left because they stopped feeling the spark, and more importantly, they lacked the maturity to nurture something deeper than emotional highs. They wanted love to feel like a constant rush. But when real intimacy began to ask more of them, patience, effort, consistency, they mistook that depth for dullness. They confused emotional safety with emotional boredom. They didn't realize that the couples who last don't stay because the spark never fades. They stay because they learn how to build a fire that doesn't need to burn wildly to keep them warm. That's the tragedy in most breakups. It's not that love disappears. It's that one person stops feeling entertained, while the other keeps showing up with their heart in their hands, hoping it's still enough. And that's where the break truly happens, not when they leave, but when you finally realize they were already gone, long before you let them go. 3. The role of no contact. There comes a moment in every relationship, especially in its aftermath, when words no longer serve you. You've said what needed to be said. You've explained, justified, apologized, maybe even begged. But when someone stops recognizing your worth, when your presence becomes something they take for granted, the only message left to send is your absence. That's where no contact begins, not as a tactic to provoke them, not as revenge, but as a declaration of self-respect. It's the quietest decision you'll ever make, but also the loudest one they'll ever feel. Because when you stop showing up, when you no longer try to be heard or understood, something shifts. You become scarce. You become unpredictable. And in a world where people expect access to you at all times, that scarcity becomes power. Human psychology is simple in this way. Scarcity creates value. The more available something is, the more it's taken for granted. The more consistent you were, the more love, forgiveness, and patience you offered, the more they assumed it would never run out. And then it does. Suddenly the texts stop. The calls don't come. Your name disappears from their notifications, and the silence begins to speak. At first, they'll pretend not to notice. They'll tell themselves they needed space, that the breakup was the right choice. But time has a way of revealing what presence never could. And slowly, what used to feel secure, the thought of you always being there, starts to feel uncertain. That shift is not random. It's the emotional gravity of your withdrawal. Your silence isn't empty. It echoes with everything you used to give so freely, the way you cared, the way you listened, the way you held space even when they were distant. All of that becomes clear not when you say it again, but when you stop offering it. And that's the true power of no contact. It's not about punishment, it's about clarity, about reclaiming your energy from someone who forgot its value, about reminding both them and yourself that love is not owed, it's earned. Because real impact doesn't come from begging to be seen. It comes from knowing when to walk away, not to prove a point, but to protect your peace. And the moment you do that, you stop being the person who needs to be chosen and start becoming the one they regret losing. 4. Your ex's psychological response. When you withdraw, they may look calm, they may act as if they've moved on, smiling in pictures, laughing in stories, posting like nothing ever touched them, but don't be fooled by the surface, because underneath the performance, their mind is unsettled. When someone who was once deeply connected to you no longer has access to your presence, something primal is triggered, something even they can't fully understand or control. Human beings are not wired for sudden emotional detachment. We were built for connection, for safety and closeness. And when that bond is severed, even if it was their choice, the subconscious begins to fight against the silence. That's why they start doing things that don't quite make sense. Watching your stories even though they said goodbye, liking your photos but not messaging, posting vague captions that sound like they're talking to you but pretending it's just another random post. They're watching you. They're breadcrumbing you. It might begin as something subtle, a like here, a heart emoji there, a song in their story that reminds you of a memory you once shared. They're not reaching out, not fully, but they're making sure you know they still exist in your orbit. And that, in itself, is a form of reaching. But here's the truth you have to hold on to. Breadcrumbs are not reconciliation. They are fragments of discomfort, not signs of change. A breadcrumb doesn't mean they've grown. It doesn't mean they're ready to take accountability or step back into your life with the maturity they lacked before. It only means one thing. They miss the comfort your energy gave them. They miss the version of you who made it easy to feel seen without having to earn it. What they don't miss yet is the responsibility that comes with choosing you again. The responsibility to meet your emotional needs, to show up with consistency, to rebuild trust, not just familiarity. That's what separates missing someone from being ready for them. You have to understand, real transformation doesn't whisper. It doesn't hide behind vague signals and half-hearted attention. Real change shows up at your door, not metaphorically, but literally, with clear words, consistent actions, and the humility to admit where they failed you. So when the breadcrumbs come, don't chase them. Don't read between lines that weren't meant to be clear. Let them feel the distance. Let them sit in the discomfort of the silence they once chose. And let them be the one to close the gap, fully, honestly, and without conditions. Because you deserve more than confusion masked as curiosity. You deserve more than being someone's emotional safety net when they're not willing to build something real. Let their silence turn into something they can no longer ignore. Let your absence teach them what your presence never could. 5. Stay disciplined. Do not chase. This is the moment that tests you, not when they leave, but when they start to circle back in small, confusing ways. A view on your story, a vague message, a half smile in a post that feels too familiar, and suddenly your heart wants to believe again. You want to answer. You want to lean back into what felt safe. You want to believe that maybe this time it's different. But this is where most men fall apart. They mistake the flicker of attention for a flame of intention. They see a sign and rush to respond. Hope kicks in. Logic goes quiet. And just like that, they're back in her inbox, explaining, overgiving, hoping for a different ending from the same beginning. But here's what you must remember with brutal honesty. If you respond too soon, you erase the consequence. You teach her that she can walk away, disregard your value, and still return to find you waiting, unmoved, unchanged, available. They must suffer the consequences of taking you for granted. That's not about vengeance. It's about value. It's about understanding that real transformation only happens when people are forced to confront what they lost, not just miss it for a moment, but truly grasp what it means to have let something good slip away. If you shield them from that discomfort, you rob them of the very experience that could have taught them to do better. You're not here to be a backup plan. You're not here to rescue someone from their regret before they've earned redemption. You're not an emotional safety net they can fall into whenever life gets too quiet or lonely. Let them sit with their decision. Let them sit in the silence they created. Let them feel the absence of your loyalty, your consistency, your presence. Let them remember how you showed up fully, even when they didn't. Let them remember how they pushed away a love that was real, steady, and rare. Only then, when the silence becomes heavier than the comfort they thought they chose, will they start to see the truth that you weren't just someone they could reach for. You were someone they had to rise to meet. And if they don't, you still win, because you kept your dignity intact, because you didn't chase what chose to leave, because you knew the difference between being missed and being ready for. And that difference is everything. Summary. And here's what you need to remember, more than anything else. Just because it once felt magical doesn't mean it was meant to last. Some connections leave a mark that time alone can't erase. They feel larger than life, almost spiritual. You remember the first glance, the first touch, the way your entire world seemed to tilt toward them without warning. It wasn't just chemistry, it was gravity. And because of that, it's tempting to believe that something so intense must be meant to last. But not everything powerful is permanent. Some bonds feel magical only because they triggered something deep inside you, something unhealed, something hopeful, something that longed to feel seen. And that's why letting go feels so unnatural, because you're not just mourning the person, you're mourning what you felt in their presence. Still, just because something felt electric doesn't mean it was healthy. Just because it was unforgettable doesn't mean it was right. And just because there were fireworks in the beginning doesn't mean the foundation didn't collapse beneath you over time. Better to walk out of the wrong room than wait for it to change. That's not bitterness. That's wisdom. It takes strength to recognize that the chapter you're still clinging to has already ended. It takes courage to stop rereading a story that's no longer growing. Don't confuse intensity with alignment. Don't confuse longing with loyalty. And most importantly, don't confuse familiarity with fulfillment. Sometimes what you miss isn't the person. It's the version of yourself that felt alive around them. And you can become that person again without them. You are allowed to move on. You are allowed to say, yes, it mattered. Yes, I felt something real, but it wasn't built to last. That doesn't erase what you shared. It honors it and frees you from carrying it any further. So if they come back, don't meet them halfway out of habit or hunger. Stand still. Let them prove with actions and clarity that they're not just chasing a feeling. They're ready to rebuild something real. And if they never do, you've already won. Because the moment you stopped chasing love and started becoming it, you reclaimed your power. You stepped into the version of yourself that no longer needs to be chosen to feel worthy. You became the person they'll always remember, not because you waited, but because you walked away and never looked back. If something in this message spoke to your heart, I truly invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single word. You are not alone on this path. Healing does come with time, with patience, with love. If this touched you in any way, please like the video and subscribe to Stoic Station so you never miss what's coming next. Until then, stay grounded and most of all, keep walking forward.